Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Jupiter Ascending. Normally, when you hear about a notorious Hollywood bomb, you kind of really expect the worst. Even though you might have hopes that it'll be kind of like a fun, watchable mess of a movie, it usually, when you see it, those hopes and dreams crash down to earth harder than Icarus. But Jupiter Ascending flies right to the sun and just really doesn't care. It is a ridiculously amazing, high-budgeted, visually rich, with tons and tons of special effects, gaudy, ridiculous sci-fi movie that I didn't think studios were stupid enough to agree to anymore. If a silly 90s sci-fi movie had a baby with Flash Gordon serials from the 30s, and then Black Hole and Saturn VII got involved somehow, and they had some of the DNA of David Lynch's Dune gotten there, and then you can kind of get Jupiter Ascending. It's kind of a mixed bag of everything going on with science fiction and anime and classic movie serials, and not Star Wars, but like almost everything that influenced it. But Jupiter Ascending was kind of like a masterpiece of ridiculously over-the-top Hollywood filmmaking in a way that I actually kind of liked. Jupiter Jones, played by Mila Kunis, who is just scrubbing toilets and cleaning houses for a living. She really cleans houses, but for some reason she specializes in cleaning toilets. So she's there, and then it turns out that her genes are exactly like the mother of this intergalactic dynasty. The three children of this woman have become these very rich business people, and they harvest planets' entire populations and make them into this weird dust stuff that helps people keep living forever. And all these people are several thousands of years old, but because she has the same kind of DNA and their weird kind of culture, she's entitled to some of the inheritance, which involves planets, and one of the planets that her inheritance would have is actually Earth, which is actually ripe for the picking for harvest, so that they can make more of this weird dust stuff so they can stay young. And one of the vials, I think, is like 100 people basically. A lot of people want to get her and try to convince her to give them her inheritance, but Channing Tatum, who plays this dog person, Kane Wise, who is there to rescue her and continues to rescue her quite a few times throughout the movie. He is hired by one of the people in this monarchy to bring her back, but then decides he needs to protect her throughout this film as she goes from different child of this woman to be convinced of what she should do with this inheritance. I kind of enjoy what the Wachowskis have done since the Matrix movies, even if I didn't really like 2/3 of the Matrix movies. I like that they kind of make these incredibly ambitious, insanely visual, crazy movies that cost way too much, don't seem to make a lot of money, but I'm not an accountant for Warner Brothers, so I'm not really that worried about it. But they're always fun to see. I don't necessarily love Cloud Atlas, I love Speed Racer, and I will admit neither are like great movies, but it's kind of just amazing to behold and watch a filmmaker just go all out and really succeed at doing that. I can't think of two directors like the Wachowskis who can do this as well as they do. They can never have a movie not have some crazy things going on for too long, and the energy they bring, I think this is more Speed Racer than Cloud Atlas if we're talking post-Matrix. There's always a visual feast to behold. This is their first 3D movie. I actually got to see it in IMAX 3D, and it was really amazing. It filled up the entire screen. There was always something interesting and fun to look at. There was always cool things going on in the background. Their visual storytelling in this is some of the best it's been since Speed Racer. In some ways, it's actually kind of terrible, and in other ways, it's just a sight to behold. But then they would cut to other shots, and you'd be like, oh, what? That's supposed to mean that? I'm glad someone said that just then so you could convey it. That kept happening. I kind of let it go because it was such an interesting mess. It's not like Taken 3 or A Good Day to Die Hard where it's just like awful and my brain's tuning out and I'm hoping it's over. This was just like, I was kind of dumbfounded, like, but you were going so well. Why did you just do that? This movie was gloriously silly. So many ideas at once. They didn't really understand what to put in and what not to, and all the mistakes of their own style and the pros of their own style all coming together at once. I don't think they really knew how to tone it down. What's funny, and I've read it in other reviews, but I thought it when I was watching it, is when The Matrix came out, it was really kind of viewed as the counterpoint to such an excessive and ridiculous and overwrought science fiction film like The Phantom Menace. And now they are making the kind of film that Phantom Menace was. But this is a lot more fun. I would actually rewatch this and it wouldn't be painful. There's no real Jar Jars in it, but there's no real good performance performances at all, except for Eddie Redmayne. It's kind of like they throw everything they can at it. And actually, Warner Brothers had asked the Wachowskis to actually make their own kind of original franchise for the studio, and were kind of given a blank check. It's an interesting idea that a studio came to a big director and was like, look, we'll give you all the money you want, just make an original franchise. It's interesting when you see someone make one that just was not really ever gonna work ever, but is kind of fun and silly and a ridiculous idea in itself. I kind of like when you just let filmmakers go, and I guess the Wachowskis have been able to do that for 3 films now. This is their first film since the Matrix movies that's an original work. Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas were both based on things, but this is their attempt to really make a big sci-fi movie since the Matrix movies. A wholly original idea, and a studio's like, go for it, we really need that, we need this right now. And they come out with something that just like boggles the mind at how they thought this could be something that people would want to see more of, or thought that people would like earnestly like. I like their chutzpah, and I think I always will like that about the Wachowskis in this phase of their career. I don't know if they can keep doing this, because I don't think they've actually made a lot of money in comparison to the money they've been given. Like a movie like Seventh Son, which costs half as much as this movie did, but was way less enjoyable. And from a financial standpoint, I'm sure they'd much rather have Seventh Son. I think from an artistic standpoint, this movie's so kind of alive. It's alive in all the wrong ways, but kind of love it for that. It is kind of like that 90s sense of fashion and character design, which was an awful time for character design. And then you have the whole Flash Gordon movie serial thing where Channing Tatum keeps saving Mila Kunis's character like a million times. If this was a serial in the 30s, it would blow people's minds because they would be like, whoa, special effects. But also, it would be really good at doing that because it essentially just does that over and over again with each of the places and each of the people she goes to. She has to be rescued again by Channing Tatum's dog boy, and he has to save her, and she almost didn't get out of it, and that just keeps happening over and over again. Did they think we wouldn't notice that it's like the same plot over and over again? Like with the serials, they thought they were for kids. They didn't really take them that seriously. They had all sorts of flaws in them, so you kind of let it go. But they just like flat out just took stuff that even George Lucas would have been like, no, you can't do that. No one's gonna like that. And it's kind of like if John Carter was a lot more redeemable movie. You have these two leads in it. Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum, oddly, if there was like a romantic comedy coming out this weekend with them, I bet it would do well and be pretty decent. They'd have lots of chemistry. But as these roles, I don't really get Mila Kunis in this part. She didn't really have much chemistry with anyone. I just don't think this is the kind of role for her as a star. Channing Tatum's character is so ridiculous and strange that I don't think there's anyone who could have made that work. It was like if Gambit and Guy Fieri and a dog, like everything in this movie is a million things combined, and in all the worst ways, in a kind of laughably funny, silly way that you're like, I'll go with it. Those Wachowskis, they get me every time. But yeah, that's Channing Tatum's character, where you're just like, what is this thing that he is? But then Eddie Redmayne, who I never really considered an actor until I saw Theory of Everything. But then I saw this movie, and he does a performance that's just like an older English actor being the villain in a science fiction film. He so goes for it. Half the time he's talking like he has a sore throat. And then suddenly when he's upset about something, he just like bursts into screaming. It's ridiculously over the top and ridiculously villainous and everything I want from an evil sci-fi movie villain when I was a kid. His performance is almost the embodiment of this movie, in that I know it's terrible, but I fucking love the artistry behind it. I want him to play more villains because wow, when you see those older actors who knew they weren't probably going to get a role for a while, so they just way overdid it. Damn, if he did that consciously, I'm gonna assume no one really consciously gave out what I took in, which was this is a silly science fiction film. I kind of love silly science fiction because I grew up in the 90s with the Sci-Fi channel and they could never afford like good sci-fi movies, so you'd get stuck with these weird, strange things that like time and the box office had forgotten. And Jupiter Ascending is certainly one of those, but in just like this wild, crazy style. I'm not gonna say this is a good movie. It has all these faults to it. Its structure is strange. Visually, it's all over the place in terms of quality and storytelling. There's so much I loved about how it's like this just gaudy, ridiculously stupid, silly science fiction film in a way that studios are so controlling now about their big Hollywood epics that they would never kind of let this happen to this degree. And most of the time when this happens, like a John Carter, it just turns into just a crap movie that looks kind of nice. But this is an ambitiously crap movie that is just like so wonderful in its silliness. It's what I wish Black Hole and Saturn VII was, because it just goes that extra mile into redonkulousness. It just like doesn't let go of it. I always am so inspired and just impressed with their ambition to make movies like this, like Cloud Atlas or Speed Racer. No one else could have made a movie that ridiculous and that expensive and have that much director vision going all throughout it. I mean, they're always like these original movies, and there's a lot written recently about it's kind of a rare thing, directors being able to make an original kind of sci-fi movie and do whatever they want. I don't know if this is really a good example of that, because it kind of gives that a bad name, both financially and creatively, but I kind of love the result of it. The box office kind of bomb and bad kind of movie that I love about Hollywood. It gives me that kind of curiosity where you're like, oh man, you gotta check this out. But it's an amazing enough of an experience that it's certainly memorable, and it kind of continues my love of what they've been doing with these just ridiculously high budgeted, ambitious, strange movies that they've been putting out. This movie was made for an art of book, and I'm sure if you had just found the art of book of this movie and had never heard of it, you'd be like, what is this movie? It seems amazing. And then you'd see it and go, oh, it's just a really cool looking, ambitiously made, big budgeted science fiction film that you'll wonder for a long time, like, wow, what were they thinking? But I kind of love to think, what were they thinking? So if you have seen Jupiter Ascending and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.